a very warm welcome. You're watching Middle East Now on I24 News. Now, we have been here before, but could a hostage deal be closer now than at any time in the past 9 months? Hamas has softened some of its demands, namely a complete end to the war, and the Mossad chief David Barnea is in Cairo to discuss the details. Our Joe Brown has the latest.
It's always one step forward, 2 steps back for the thousands of Israelis hoping for a hostage deal with Hamas.
Every morning, wake up with a hope and going to sleep disappointment in a great disappointment.
With Hamas agreeing to compromise on certain aspects of the hostage deal and an Israeli negotiating team preparing to visit Cairo and Doha this week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced that he was standing firm on his side of the negotiations. In a statement on Sunday night, he reiterated his non-negotiable demands for a hostage ceasefire deal. They include Israel returning to battle once the truce is over, a ban on weapons smuggling across the Gaza-Egypt border, a prohibition on terrorists returning to northern Gaza, and maximising the number of living hostages returning from the Gaza Strip. The statement from Netanyahu also notes that this was agreed to by US President Joe Biden in his initial proposal designed to end the war. This comes after Hamas said on Sunday that it was willing to drop one of its key demands in negotiations, namely a complete end in the war with the return of some of the hostages, both dead and alive. The terror group claims that Israel is yet to respond to the latest amendments, but it is believed that it will receive a response this week during a summit in Doha with representatives from the US, Qatar, Egypt, and Israel. Netanyahu's statement was criticised by Israeli officials, who were quoted in Israeli media as saying that the Prime Minister is intentionally trying to drag out negotiations until his highly anticipated US Congress speech towards the end of the month and the Knesset recess, so that he can keep his government, whose hardline members may resign in protest if a deal is agreed. But this will they, won't they feels like Groundhog Day for families of the hostages.
We've been in situations like this before where there were talks for a deal that is already coming to be made, and eventually it was not, and it is a great disappointment. So even the optimistic wind that's blowing right now, we try to avoid these two and keep realistic.
The Prime Minister's statement came on the 9th anniversary of the October 7th massacre, marking 9 months of horror for those who were abducted and for their families who are waiting to see their loved ones again.
Well, with me this hour in the studio, Brigadier General Hanan Geffen. He's the former commander of the 8200 Intelligence Unit in the IDF.
Good evening, Laura.
Good to see you, Hanan. Thanks for being with us. And on the line, Rami Igra is the former head of the Mossad's Missing in Action Unit. Thank you for joining us as well, Rami. Hanan, I'll start with you.
Good evening.
Good evening to you. I'll start with you, Hanan. Are we close to a deal, or has the Prime Minister jeopardised it by outlining his red lines last night?
Yeah, blaming the Israeli Prime Minister is one of the biggest mistakes that part of the Israeli society is doing. We heard it time and again in the during the hostage meetings and gatherings, because this is what exactly the other side would like to hear, that Israel is blaming its prime minister. Now, I would say that the biggest question is here, because we are in a war that we have to see the end goal, a war of independence. And now we may close the deal. I would say within 1 week, if we give up everything, withdraw totally the 6th of November, 6th of October borders, and that's okay. All the hostages will be returned in no time. But then Israel faced the catastrophe that we have seen in 6th October, multiplied by the Arabs in the West Bank, multiplied by
Aren't you then sacrificing the 120 people?
This is the biggest question, and this is the only way? Why did this negotiation started in the first place? Was it because of the Israeli pressure, the military pressure? So if it is the military pressure, why don't we increase the pressure to get the results, all of the end goal of Israel. Now, blaming the Prime Minister of stating very clearly that the goal of Israel is getting rid of the Hamas, not letting it recover and try again the 6th of October, and he's promised to do, it's not the right way.
Okay. Rami, do you agree with that? Or was the Prime Minister wrong to lay out those red lines last night?
I would like to cheer the Brigadier General. At last, somebody is saying what I've been saying for a very long time. But before we go into the price, and before we go into it, it's evident. It's really evident, Hannah. Before we go into the price and what is the real price, because the Israeli public doesn't really understand the real price of the deal which is on the table. Let's go to what the Hamas agreed to. The Hamas agreed to put aside the prerequisite for a ceasefire. It did not put aside its requisite for ceasefire between the first stage and the second stage. The second stage, when the soldiers and the young men will be still hostages, is all contingent on the fact that we will agree to a cessation of hostilities. But not only that, the Hamas also declared before the negotiations started that the Archimedes point is, or their biggest request or their biggest demand is that they stay in power. They will continue to be the sovereign in the Gaza Strip. And if this happens, what have we done? We have, after 8-9 months of very difficult battle, after 9 months of casualties, after 9 months of what we have gone through, for the sake of 120 hostages, and they are very important, we will go back to the 6th of October, and we will be facing Hamas in a different way, much stronger, much more difficult.
All right, but let me interject, Rami, and Hanan, you can answer this first of all if you want. The IDF says that Hamas no longer poses the same risk that it did on the 6th of October. It can't carry out another 7th of October. And again, what is the price of not bringing back those hostages? What is the long-term price for Israel, for this country, if it doesn't get those people back?
Yeah, Hannah. I will ask that. You know, all the Arab world now, I'm listening, I'm reading the Arab media constantly, day after day. Now they are in high. I read the Hezbollah announcement, the Arab announcement. They read the Israeli media, the fighting within the Israeli society, military against the political against military. They're saying Israel is defeated. The spirits are very high there. They are planning for the next day, for next time, and they are saying this is the first time after 75 years that Israel is being beaten. Now, if we don't understand this meaning, it means that Israel is going to face a very difficult situation. The Hamas will be easily regroup, just paying enough money to enough people. He will have brigades, countless brigades, because the money will be pouring in. We will face a different Hamas.
Rabbi Igor, why doesn't Israel just take this deal and deal with what's left of Hamas afterwards? Because the IDF says, one of the things it says is that it cannot continue fighting in Gaza indefinitely. These are many reservists. The Israeli army was not designed for a war this long. Why doesn't Israel take this deal, get some people back, and then deal with Hamas?
I would like to enhance what Hanan just said. One more thing. If we go for this deal, we will be looking at West Bank, which will be completely Hamas-oriented, and we will be facing the same things that we have faced on the southern border. We will be facing the same thing on the eastern border, Kfar Saba, Bat Hefer, etc., etc. All these towns are hundreds of meters away from Hamas strongholds. And if we let the jihad win, be victorious in this situation, we are facing a battle.
Who can look at Gaza and say Hamas has won, Rami? Really?
Well, you say that, and I say that.
And the IDF says Rami. The IDF says it.
But all the inhabitants in the Gaza Strip, all of them say differently. The inhabitants in the West Bank see them victorious. Now, I want to say, one more thing, and we're talking about can this country suffer the loss of 120 hostages? All of us want these people home. We all pray for their safety, and there is a way to get them back, and it's not by by military power, and it's not by surrendering to the Hamas. The way is to reinstating in the Gaza Strip a different government. The government should not be a Hamas government. The sovereign in the Gaza Strip should be some other Palestinian entity. You ask me, the most suited entity for this is the Palestinian Authority, but the current Israeli political situation in the current government is against this. One more little thing. Sinwar really does not want this deal for one little other reason that all of us have discussed. He knows that if this deal goes through, this government falls. And if this government falls, the Palestinian Authority will appear in the Gaza Strip.
Well, that's another reason, surely, to take the deal.
No, to refuse the deal.
But
exactly
but why?
the opposite.
But if the Palestinian Authority can prevent Hamas from taking back the Gaza Strip,
but
why wouldn't Israel accept that?
I agree with you. I agree with you. We would love this government. I personally would like this government to fall, and I would like the Palestinian Authority or some other kind of Palestinian entity to take over in the Gaza Strip. Is this a possibility? It is. But we cannot let, in the situation we're in right now, the jihad, it's not the Hamas, it's the Hamas plus the other terror groups, which are religious, Muslim, extreme religious jihad groups. We cannot let these groups win this battle by bringing us to a deal which is really a surrender.
Polls show, Rami, that Israelis don't agree with you. Hanan Geffen, most Israelis prioritize getting the hostages home.
It's not true.
Right,
not
right.
true.
Well, it is
but if you ask the Israelis,
67% of Israelis prioritize getting their hostages back. 21%.
It's the wrong question. It's the wrong question. The right question is,
which question you ask?
Do you agree for a ceasefire now? And the answer will be no. Most of the Israeli will say no ceasefire. The North people in the North.
Of hostility, not ceasefire.
The most recent poll by Channel 12 News shows that 67% of Israelis prioritize getting the hostages home. 21% prioritize defeating Hamas.
No, but these are wrong questions.
The wrong question.
Yeah, Rami, please go ahead.
Okay, Rami.
Okay, I will answer this. Let's look at how it breaks down. 21 or 27% want this deal come what may. The rest want this deal with all kinds of conditions which really fit what we've been saying to you in the last 10 minutes.
All right, Rami Igra, Hanan Geffen, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rami.
Well, every minute is like a lifetime for the families of the 120 people who are still being held by terrorists in Gaza. They include the parents of Karina Ariev, who've been waiting now for nearly 9 months to find out what happened to their daughter, who was violently kidnapped by Hamas. More in this report by Jody Notilovitz.
9 months after the horrific events of October 7th, the parents of Karina Ariev are still waiting for answers, and considering the amount of time that has passed, have many questions too. Karina, along with 4 other female soldiers, was taken from the Nahal Oz base where she served as a lookout. Are you concerned that your daughter has been sexually assaulted?
Okay. Yes, we thought about it straight away. After a few days, after we realized the magnitude of the horror of that day, the rape that was committed, the murders, everything the woman went through there. And yes, we thought about it all the time. And you try not to think about these things, but when you are left alone with your thoughts, then it comes to mind. That my 19-year-old little girl is being sexually abused there for 9 months, it's something that paralyzes you. You don't know what to do with it. You don't know where to turn, who to turn to in order to get her out of there as quickly as possible.
When I think of my girl in captivity as a father, that my girl has been kidnapped and is found with a gun to her temple, I have trouble thinking logically, and it really scares me. This event has been going on for 9 months, and all that arises from it. If it's a pregnant woman, and like you said, she comes back with a child, it's really hard and I feel powerless. I can't do anything to get her out of there.
In May, with still no deal on the horizon, Karina's parents, together with the parents of the other 4 soldiers taken from Nahal Oz, decided to release the video of the kidnapping and let the evidence speak for itself.
Karina, if you hear me, we want you to do everything to stay alive, to survive these days in captivity. And for our part, we are doing everything possible for you to come back to us. So just survive. Love you and miss you very, very much.
We are fighting to get you all back, and you will come back. I know you will.
Well, Israel still controls the Rafah crossing between Egypt and Gaza, and it also has operational control over the Philadelphia corridor, that long border with Egypt. And Cairo is now reportedly discussing a plan in Cairo tonight, a plan with the United States to prevent weapons smuggling from Egypt in the future. That is something that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said is key to any deal. Well, to talk more about Egypt's position, we're joined by Dalia Ziada. She's an Egyptian scholar and a senior fellow at the Jerusalem Center for Foreign Affairs. Great to see you again, Dalia. So is that true? Is Egypt really considering working with the United States to prevent weapons from getting into Gaza?
Thank you, Laura. It's always a pleasure to be with you. Actually, it's a tough question to ask. The question is not about whether Egypt is capable of doing this or willing of doing this, but is mainly about the factors that has prevented Egypt from doing this in the past few years and that still exist. And one of these factors has to do with the tribes in Sinai. Before, in 2015 and beyond, Egypt successfully was able to block all the tunnels between Sinai and Gaza. But by 2017 up to 2019, this led to a lot of troubles between the Egyptian leadership and the tribes in Sinai who were benefiting from these tunnels, who were profiting from these tunnels. And thus the Egyptian government was forced, the Egyptian leadership, I mean the Egyptian military, was forced somehow to allow these tribes to resume digging tunnels and smuggling products, including also weapons, to Gaza on the condition that it will be one way from Egypt into Gaza and nothing comes from Gaza into Egypt, means persons or goods or whatever. So the tribes kept the deal. These tribes were later helpful to the Egyptian military and the Egyptian intelligence forces in controlling the border with Gaza after the war erupted in October. And now it has become too hard for Egypt to challenge these tribes by saying, okay, we're going back again and we are blocking the tunnels and we are preventing you from profiting from these tunnels. So despite it seems like a very nice promise from Egypt, I don't think it is realistic or doable on the ground. And Israel should not withdraw from the border, from controlling the borders in Rafah in any way until it gets credible guarantees from Egypt and the United States and other multi-forces, international forces, and so that this will not happen again. The smuggling of weapons will not happen again under any conditions, under any pressure, or under any pressures.
Okay, well, speaking more broadly, Dalia, how is Egypt preparing for what might be soon a post-Hamas Gaza, and does it intend to play any role in the future governance of the Strip?
Actually, the Egyptian leadership and also some other countries have indicated to their Israeli counterparts that they are willing to play a tangible role in the reconstruction of Gaza post the removal of Hamas or post the war, in case, for example, a ceasefire deal was reached with Hamas, which is something I personally think will be like a lifeline thrown to Hamas, and I really don't want to see this happening. But we have two scenarios. Either the ceasefire deal happens, we are seeing now a lot of negotiations happening around this issue. Actually, as we speak, there is a security delegation from Israel in Cairo negotiating this potential ceasefire deal. Or the other thing is that we get rid of Hamas and thus Gaza will be clean and ready for a new governmental and security infrastructure, which in this case, many of the moderate Arab countries, including quote-unquote moderate, of course, including Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, and others, who said we are willing to intervene to reconstruct Gaza and help with rebuilding this infrastructure, security and governmental infrastructure. But still, we need to wait and see what's going to happen first with the ceasefire deal.
All right, Dalia, what about the Egyptian street, if you like? Are people still very concerned, very preoccupied about what's happening to people in Gaza? Where does this rank in terms of their priorities? Because they are having their own problems in Egypt, aren't they? Not least of which are ongoing power cuts, sometimes for 12, 13 hours.
Speaking about the power cuts, it's so ironic that some of the media in Egypt and even mainstream press and press reports are blaming the power cuts on Israel, saying that Israel has caused economic problems for Egypt by limiting the gas exportation and thus affecting the energy sector in Egypt in general. Of course, this is one of the ways how Egyptians are concerned by the situation in Gaza. The mainstream in Egypt, as you know, are very sympathetic with Hamas and are very against Israel. I think this will continue to be the case in the next period, but in Egypt in general, there is a sense of relief that there is another war is happening in the north of Israel with Hezbollah, which means somehow they say that the Israeli forces will be obliged to leave from the south to the north, and thus this will give some relief for Gaza and thus some relief for Egypt. But still, in my opinion, it's all related. A war with Hezbollah will eventually affect Egypt, and a war in Gaza is still also affecting Egypt in many ways. And the best solution is really, as I said before, for everyone to support Israel in finishing Hamas and then finishing Hezbollah.
Dalia, we appreciate your analysis. As always, Dalia Ziada, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So when will the next phase of operations begin in Gaza? Today, IDF tanks rolled into the northern part of the Strip once again. Our Robert Swift has the latest.
Israeli tanks and infantry are operating in Gaza City once again. The IDF entered southern parts of the ruined city due to intelligence on Hamas and Islamic Jihad infrastructure there, it said. Palestinian residents reported heavy airstrikes prior to the incursion, focused on the Tel Al-Hawa neighborhood. An evacuation order was announced by the IDF's Arabic spokesperson Sunday night.
From Nakba to Nakba, displacement to displacement. God help us.
How many times have you been displaced?
Many times, and we can't find anywhere safe to stay.
This is the second evacuation order given by the IDF since the culmination of its Rafah operation, with subsequent ops in Khan Yunis and now Gaza City. Elsewhere in northern Gaza, the IDF was already conducting maneuvers in Shijaiya, raiding what it said was a Hamas command and control center located in a school and clinic. Hamas and Islamic Jihad indicated that their units were in contact with the IDF in Shijaiya and Tel Al-Hawa, using mortars and improvised explosive devices.
Brigadier General Hanan Geffen is still with me in the studio. Let's go back, first of all, and talk about what Dalia was saying about the border with Egypt, because that's very important, isn't it? Because ever since Israel has had control of the Rafah crossing, Hamas has not been able to rearm, it would appear.
And she portrayed very, very brilliantly the problem, because this is run by local tribes with very... a lot of economical incentive to go on with digging tunnels for the future. So it is a huge task to control them. I believe Israel will be very careful to trust anybody besides the Israeli IDF to control this corridor. But I would like to point to this meeting, because I believe the meeting is in Cairo. I believe the American, Israeli, and the Egyptian has more than the Philadelphia corridor. There are a lot of activities going on beyond the radar, vis-a-vis the population, controlling, entering other people, Palestinians, and so on. We have seen, for instance, just The movement of the people from Rafah during May to other shelters in the north was so orderly because there were so many powers behind the curtains.
That's what the Americans and everyone else were saying. You can't go into Rafah because
Don't
you'll
go
never
because
get all
there's
the
no place.
civilians
Kamala
out,
Harris
right?
said no place in Gaza for 1.5 million people. So they quietly in 3 weeks or 4 weeks moved from Rafah about 10 or 15 kilometers to very orderly camps with hospitals, field hospitals. We didn't hear anything, any problem, not from international government organization, from none. So there are a lot of activities going behind the curtains. Egypt is involved certainly with the Kuwaitis and others in preparing, again, a condition that it will not be so public in the public eye because there's
right, and they won't commit publicly to having anything to do with Gaza while Hamas still exists, of course.
Yes, so they are sensitive to this, but they are still in the background. They are working, preparing, helping the Israelis, Americans, and others prepare for the day after, what they call.
And just very quickly, why does the IDF need to go back into the north if it's already been there?
The IDF will go back to the north, to the center, to the south for many months because getting Hamas out of the population is a huge task. Right now, getting the Hamas military organization, military infrastructure, communication, intelligence gathering capabilities is one thing. But getting Hamas out of the governing the people, people will understand that Hamas is no longer in power. That will take.
The question is who takes their place. OK, Hanan, we'll leave it there for now. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
We're going to take a very short break. When we come back, we'll take you to the north of Israel. The IDF has been striking southern Lebanon today in the ongoing battle with the Iranian-backed group Hezbollah. That's next.
I have been suffering from difficult chronic asthma for over 20 years. My sinuses were clogged, and I was supposed to have surgery. After 6 months of using Z-Medic Air, I experienced a dramatic change in my quality of life. I no longer use inhalers. My facial skin is more alive. I am less tired. I felt more awake during the day, which is something I didn't experience prior to me using Z-Medic Air.
This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com. This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com.
ครับผมจะนัดล่วงหน้าครับนัดล่วงหน้าแล้วปกติใช้เวลานานสักเหรอคะจริงๆถ้าคน
Welcome back. Let's turn our attentions to the north because the IDF has been striking targets in southern Lebanon today and claims to have killed senior Hezbollah operative Mustafa Hassan Salman. Our Zach Andrews joins us now from the north of Israel. Zach, what's happening?
Hi, Laura. And that name you just mentioned is what the IDF says, a man responsible for rocket and missile fire here on the north of Israel. The IDF, much different than early in this campaign, early in this war, when they wouldn't even come out and say that they were killing these people involved in some of the capacities to attack Israel, trying not to inflame tensions within Lebanon, within Hezbollah. That's no more. Now they're coming out within hours of the attack and saying, we airstriked this individual and killed him. This is coming, in the last report, in the last hour, I said it was quiet. There had been no attacks registered at this point in the day. Well, since then, there's now been 5 that Hezbollah has claimed responsibility for. We had multiple alarms. We're still assessing some of the damage. It does appear that there was light damage to a home in the western Galilee. No reports of casualties at this point. And it does appear that some of this rocket fire that was aimed at some of these communities was more of these ATGMs or RPG-style attacks, which is shoulder-based or ground-based rocket fire that's not detected by the Iron Dome, not detected by the air defense systems here, or capable of being shot down. So we are hearing elsewhere, though, that there was near Kiryat Shmona and the attack there was an interception or multiple that took place, but it does not appear that in that area there's any damage reported as of yet, but some of this is still coming in. It was within the last hour. So still keeping really close eye on it. Hezbollah, though, 5 attacks they've claimed responsibility for in the last hour.
And Zach, we've just passed the 9-month mark, haven't we, since this war began? I know you've spent a lot of time in the north. You've spoken to people who've had to leave their homes. Just give us a sense of how people are coping with that landmark. And, of course, the government saying that children should be able to go back to school in the north in just a couple of months.
Yeah, that's remarkable, isn't it? I've spent maybe too much time up here in the north over the last 9 months now. It feels surreal in the sense that to my left in this community here, there's about to be a bar mitzvah. So people are still gathering and still outside. We're outside the exclusion zone right now, although near some of the rocket fire. There's still that pace of life that exists in certain spaces. Businesses are open, but the majority remain closed. Even those 10, 15 miles south of the border, mostly closed. And the things that are open are the shops that are selling some of the home goods and some of the restaurants. But all the specialty industries and some of the agricultural up here still closed. It's hard to imagine what that's going to look like, knowing that a lot of the people that would be, a lot of the families that would be sending their kids to school, they have their homes, they live inside the exclusion zone and remain evacuated and are living elsewhere in the country, some of them living abroad. So what will take shape? Some of the questions we've had into the local councils, the regional councils here, knowing that they've been prepping for potentially a return to school in modified formats, distance learning once again, and also that they've tried to copy what's been taking place in Ukraine and have some classrooms be underground in shelters. We're not entirely certain at this point if that's going to be something that actually takes place right away when they plan, or if this plan is even going to go through to have schools resume once again. But putting that out there, that maybe that could happen, potentially a good sign. As you talk to people up here, not a lot of hope that that's actually what's going to be taking place here.
Yeah, people are desperate to get back to their normal lives, aren't they? It's absolutely heartbreaking. Thank you, Zach. Zach Andrews there up in the north of Israel.
Thanks, Laura.
Well, Hezbollah's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, congratulated Iran's newly elected President Masoud Pezeshkian when he made a speech yesterday. The so-called moderate defeated his hardline rival in elections in Iran earlier this week. Pezeshkian says he wants Iran to have friendly ties with all countries except Israel. So can we expect any change in foreign policy under Iran's new president? Some are sceptical. Let's talk now to Dr. Walid Fares. He's a foreign policy expert and the author of several books, including most recently Iran, Imperialist Republic. Good to have you with us, Dr. Fares, as always.
Thank you.
So has anything changed? Because if you look at the Western media, there is a lot of excitement about Masoud Pezeshkian becoming the new president of Iran.
Well, of course, in the quarters around the world, the free world, the West, that are in support of the Iran deal and the benefits of the Iran deal, you have excitement. And with them, obviously, the reaction of some media, most academia. I wouldn't worry about that. I would worry about what really is happening inside the regime of Iran with the election. In fact, the Iranian diaspora called it the selection of a new president. The new president is, in fact, an indication that the real higher president, Ayatollah Khamenei, is going now to have two tools. One tool is what's happening on the ground, all these militias, Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis, Hashid in Iraq, etc. They could put pressure. And now they have a tool, refurbished tool, which is a new person, a smiley face, who is promising that, they will do better approaches, like Khatami years ago. And we know what we got. The regime is, in fact, deciding, not the new president, what are the steps to be taken. And I think they're going to have sophisticated policies. If they get what they want, that's the new reformist president. If they don't get what they want, then you have all these H's, the organizations known as terrorist organizations.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot more of the former foreign policy chief Javad Zarif walking around with Pezeshkian, which is interesting. He was a very familiar face, wasn't he, a few years ago? But one of President Pezeshkian's first acts was to send a letter to the Hezbollah chief, Hassan Nasrallah, and pledge Iran's ongoing support for the group. Does this suggest then that they will still be aggressively pursuing this aim to dominate the Middle East via its proxies?
Absolutely. There is no question about that, Laura. Basically, the letter is a stunt, a propaganda stunt. He is going to be sending a letter to Nasrallah, who's seen as the Ayatollah of Lebanon. In fact, they do coordinate, their assistants coordinate. And remember, let's all remember that Mr. Nasrallah is part of the regional international Khomeinist leadership that is headed by the Grand Ayatollah Khamenei. So whenever you hear about letters sent to Houthis to tell them to do this or to support Hezbollah, it's all for media consumption.
Talking about media consumption, the Reuters news agency has just released some satellite images which show, purport to show anyway, ramped up missile production inside Iran. Is this just something else that the United States and its allies have missed? Should this be a cause for concern?
It should always be a cause of concern when missiles, anti-aircraft missiles or ballistic missiles or missiles that can eventually have non-conventional heads. All of that is a great concern because we've seen waves of attack by the Islamic regime on Israel. It's not a supposition. We've seen it. People there lived it. And the same thing about having ballistic missiles in the hands of the Houthis, who are targeting not just Bab el-Mandeb in the south, they are targeting as high as north as the Sinai and the Negev and even beyond that. So yes, we need to be concerned. As far as the agencies, the US and Western agencies, they know always 1 or 2 inches more than what the media knows, but it's the policy. It's what the White House wants, what 10 Downing Street wants, or the Elysee wants. That would count.
Dr. Walid Faris, we appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Brigadier General Hanan Geffen with me in the studio. We've got a new president in Iran. He's being described as a moderate. There's a lot of enthusiasm about him wanting to engage with the United States and so forth. Is this the same trick that we've seen before?
Yeah, absolutely. It's he's not influential in cases that we are interested in. All the relations with the Hezbollah and the Houthis and all are run by different organizations, different mechanism. He's mostly maybe a little bit foreign affairs and mostly internal affairs. This is his will be his main task. This is what he will be examined on. What is the state of the economy and so on.
Prime Minister Netanyahu will be addressing Congress shortly. Do you think he'll be speaking about Iran?
He will speak about Iran, definitely.
Is anyone listening, is the question.
Pardon?
Is anybody listening to him, though?
Well, that's a different case, but I will say that I guess that the problem with Gaza and the Palestinian Hamas, this will be the main cause, but he will not neglect the Iranian, because this is the looming threat not only on Israel, but Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, of course Europe. It's a threat that the international community has to deal with.
Brigadier General Hanan Geffen, thank you very much.
Thanks, Laura.
Well, the US military's Central Command and its allies say that they destroyed multiple Houthi drones in Yemen yesterday after the rebel group threatened to attack Saudi Arabia over its plans to target the Houthis financially. Our Middle East correspondent Ariel Saran has the story.
While much of the world's focus is on Israel's war in Gaza and the Lebanese border, there's another active front in the region that's occupying Western forces, perhaps even more. The U.S. military and allied forces said they destroyed 4 Houthi drones in Yemen and the Gulf of Aden on Sunday, hours after the Iranian-backed group threatened to renew attacks on Saudi Arabia. The reason? Riyadh's plans to move banks and airports from Houthi-controlled Sana'a to Aden, where the internationally recognized Yemeni government is based.
The Saudis must realize that we can never remain silent regarding such reckless, foolish, and stupid steps. They must stop this wrong path, or else we will respond, everything in equal measure. The Riyadh airport with the Sana'a airport, banks with banks, ports with ports.
The Houthi leader warned the Saudis not to act, quote, in service of America and Israel. And in similar fashion to what Hezbollah does to Israel, Houthi media published aerial images of key airports and ports in Saudi Arabia with the words, "Try us." Naturally, the latest Houthi threat sparked outrage in Saudi Arabia, but also potentially threatens the fragile ceasefire in place. And with fears over a regional war rising, Saudi Arabia could once again find itself directly involved militarily in Yemen.
Thousands of people have been demonstrating in the Moroccan city of Tangier to call for their government to cut ties with Israel. People took to the port city amid unconfirmed reports that an Israeli ship had docked there. Well, there have been several large demonstrations against Israel and in support of the Palestinians since October 7th in various cities in Morocco. Israel and Morocco normalised ties under the 2020 Abraham Accords. To talk more about that, we're joined by Dr. Mohamed Shtatou, political analyst and senior professor at the University of Rabat. Great to see you as always, Dr. Shtatou. Thank you for being with us. Just how large are these protests and do they reflect public opinion in Morocco?
Well, the protests have been going on for quite a long period of time, but they don't reflect the Moroccan opinion, in the sense that a lot of people in Morocco support the alliance that Morocco has with Israel for the last 2 years, and I don't think that's going to change. What people want is Morocco to act as a mediator in the present war and probably try to bring the two sides to the negotiating table. So I think that's the majority of the people feel about in Morocco for the moment. But the Islamists have been in support for the Palestinian cause for the long period of time.
I have to say, when you look at images of the protests in Morocco, they are very different to the protests we see in the United States and Europe, which are very angry, sometimes violent protests. We see a lot of support for terrorism. You don't see that in Morocco. It does seem to be pretty peaceful on the whole.
No, there is tradition in Morocco that demonstrations are well organized by people, and that people don't go overboard when it comes to expressing their feelings. They, of course, have placards. They have that express things they want to get to the television or to the media, but it doesn't go beyond that.
And I guess the question is, when it comes to the Moroccan people, is their love for the king and their trust in his wisdom stronger than the solidarity they feel with the Palestinian cause? Because it was the king's decision to pursue ties with Israel, wasn't it?
Yeah, of course. People trust the king, and the king is loved by the population, and they think that whatever he does with Israel in terms of alliance, it's for the good of the nation, and that Morocco and the Jewish people have been together for over 2,500 years, in the sense that they existed in Morocco and they were protected by Moroccans, and we have a very long culture of tolerance in Morocco vis-a-vis other religions. So people do believe that the king is doing the right thing, and they believe that the alliance with Israel is the right thing, but also they support the Palestinian nation nation, the Palestinian state, and would like to bring the two sides, as I said at the beginning, to the negotiating table and find peace in the Middle East, which will be a good thing for everybody in the region.
Absolutely. And as you pointed out, Morocco does have a Jewish community, a very old Jewish community. Morocco is one of the few Arab countries that does still have its Jews. Is this unrest about the war, these protests, is that having any impact on community relations? Is it hurting the Jewish community at all?
No, not at all. The Jews of Morocco have always been part of Morocco. They are Moroccans. They have Moroccan culture, and they are loved by everyone. They've always been the case, I mean, for 2,500 years. So it's not going to change now. The community is part of the Moroccan culture, and they are businessmen, they are intellectuals, and there are lots of intellectuals, Jewish intellectuals, who support the Palestinians. Very strong support for them. So I don't think anything is going to change today. If we had this long history with the Jews and Judaism, it's because Moroccans believe in tolerance and believe that other nations and other religions could live in Morocco in peace.
Dr. Wamesh Datou, thank you very much.
You're most welcome.
Now, Saudi Arabia is hosting this year's Esports World Cup. Some 1,500 gamers competing for a piece of a whopping $60 million prize. That is a record in esports. Let's go over to Dubai. We're joined by our correspondent, Bastien Bory. Bastien, what are the Saudis trying to achieve then with this esport tournament?
Well, as you can see, the Saudis bet enormously on e-sport and especially on e-football to diversify their largely undiversified economy, because e-sport is in some way the gateway to sport. And as you know, the value of the big European soccer teams that are owned today by the Emiratis, by the Qataris, for instance, is growing by 10 to 15% every year. So the Saudis want to break through as well. They already own 3 clubs in England and Spain, bringing in great players in Saudi Arabia, and they will certainly go further, and esports paves the way for this.
So are they onto something here, the Saudis? Do they think that esports is going to be the big thing in the future and they're getting their investment in early?
Absolutely, and it will be a way for them to also organize a real soccer World Cup in the short term. It won't be for the 2030 edition because the deadline is too short. Saudi Arabia still has to build at least 5 or 6 large stadiums, so it would be more likely for the 2034 edition, but countries like Australia and Indonesia are also expected to submit a joint bid for 2034, and these countries have never hosted the World Cup, so they have a chance. So Riyadh is going to work hard both on e-sport and sports, notably through these new investment funds that are being talked about today. It will also be necessary to create a network of players, agents, training centers to serve as a springboard for very young European players, etc. Because it's also a question of economic survival. Oil still accounts for around 40% of Saudi GDP today. And if in 30 years' time this share is not reduced to, let's say, 15 or 10%, the country's economy could just sink.
The UAE are also really into esports, aren't they? They hosted their own tournament, I believe it was in Abu Dhabi. Again, eye-watering prize money. Is there a bit of friendly rivalry, as always, between the Emiratis and the Saudis when it comes to esports?
Yes, but there is also something that is linking these two countries and their specific activity. It is sport washing. Every country in the world that organizes sporting events like these does so to improve its reputation. So how can one prove in the case of Saudi Arabia, even in the case of the United Arab Emirates, that the billions of dollars spent over the last few years on not only soccer but also golf, Formula One, were specifically used to make people forget, in the case of Saudi Arabia, for example, the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. The problem is that the accusation of sport washing and possible sanctions are still not clearly defined by international legal and sporting bodies. So So far, we're only facing unanswered questions. Are there any blameless countries? Can a country be banned from investing this or that amount of money? Can the Saudis be banned from investing in sport and e-sport because their human rights record is questionable? All this needs to be legally addressed and answered. And while obviously we mustn't close our eyes to the shady areas that may still exist in Saudi Arabia, whose policies are sometimes rightly contested, pressure must also be brought to bear on the international bodies, which have their share of responsibility in that they can define a real legal framework for what is and isn't permitted. And it's going to be beneficial for both Saudi Arabia and the UAE as well.
Is it a little unfair, though? Because any time Saudi Arabia hosts anything, it gets criticised and accused of this and that. I mean, Qatar hosted the World Cup, China had the Olympics, Russia had the Winter Games as well. I mean, is Saudi Arabia singled out a little bit, do you think? I know the Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, said in an interview a while back that he doesn't care.
I mean, as I said, as long as the international sporting bodies, such as the FIA, for instance, which is headquartered in Switzerland, as long as these international bodies do not enact laws against these activities, it will be free hands for countries like Saudi Arabia.
Bastien, thank you very much. Bastien Bory there in Dubai.
Thank you.
Now, do people suffer from obesity without even being aware of it? Well, 25% of Israelis are now classified as obese. A new method abandons the traditional BMI measurement and focuses solely on abdominal fat. And this new technique means that a lot more people in Israel are classed as obese. More in this report by Naama Kadosh.
The entire Western world in recent generations has been with a silent epidemic affecting approximately 1 billion people: obesity. In the past year, there has been a significant increase in the number of people dealing with excess weight.
Obesity is not a choice, it's a disease. People living with obesity did not choose it, but today we have useful tools to treat the disease.
People in this country eat more carbohydrates in order to relax, to improve their mood, even if only for a few minutes. And the result is that many suffer from abdominal fat, which also puts them at high health risk for diabetes and heart disease.
Consumer culture and abundance have brought us to a point where obesity is not a marginal phenomenon. On Sunday, the European Association for the Study of Obesity announced the adoption of new measures for diagnosing obesity. Instead of measuring the patient's BMI, the diagnosis will focus solely on abdominal fat and its distribution in the body.
Since the 1970s, the measure of obesity has been determined by a metric called BMI. This metric is excellent for epidemiological studies when we look at populations, but at the individual level, it is a very poor measure because it does not tell us where the fat is located.
The new measure, waist-to-height ratio, is the best predictor, mainly of the risk of heart disease.
According to the new diagnostic method, about 30% of the population in Israel will be classified as obese.
The new value of BMI essentially puts many more people into the obesity category. It erases an entire range of overweight, turning it into obesity, defining obesity as a disease, which increases fatophobia. We also can't ignore the interest that pharmaceutical companies have in this, and whether Ozempic or any other obesity drug really solves the problem at its root.
At a time when physical appearance occupies a large part of many people's daily concerns, the fight against obesity may lead to the opposite result, where physical health ostensibly comes at the expense of mental health.
My concern is that people taking this medication purely for cosmetic reasons might harm themselves.
When you concentrate only on numbers and on the BMI, it erases the people who suffer from overweight. It turns everyone obese, and obesity automatically into a disease, which is something that generates guilt, generates eating disorders, and emotional eating, and accordingly, weight gain over time.
When many people find themselves in a situation in which they consume medication to meet impossible beauty standards, it seems that Western society needs to ask itself how to maintain a healthy lifestyle, both physically and, more importantly, mentally.
Well, there is so much good food here. It really is a struggle. Anyway, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for watching. Do stay tuned to i24 News. Much more still to come. Good night.
My son suffered from many rashes in different parts of his body. It would be in his armpits, behind the knees, in his elbows. Since we started using the Z Medicare device, the fan, we found that the rashes started curing very quickly. The rashes are gone. He no longer suffers from the rashes. His skin is strong, his skin is smooth, he doesn't have rashes. The rashes no longer cause bleeding like they used to. There's just no more rashes, and we're so happy to have found this device. It's amazing.
ikusten baldin baduzu, gelditu etxe. Zorionez, geroz eta gehiago borroka feminista!
What animal would you be?
I'd love to be a dolphin. Hello, human.
A new voice is about to be heard.
אתם צופים בערוץ החדשות i24 News.
i24 News launches its fourth channel in Hebrew, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
ותיעדו את הטבח.
i24 News in Hebrew brings its international success for the past 10 years to Israel. Real-time news, sharp analyses, and passionate debates on the burning issues shaping Israeli society and the entire Middle East. And for you, English-speaking viewers, i24 News offers a unique, immersive experience. Every day until 11 a.m. EST, Hebrew programs will be broadcast live with English subtitles. And from 11 a.m. EST, back to your favorite shows in English. More than ever, the heart of a new Middle East beats on i24 News.
Hope appeared to be growing that a hostage release deal would finally be agreed upon between Israel and Hamas. But is that hope now fading? We have the scoop. And Iran appears to be keeping itself busy. Exclusive new satellite images show that the Islamic Republic has been expanding its missile production, and we have all the details. Plus, it's official. France's national elections have come to a close, and the world is shocked by the outcome. This as the leftists beat the right in a snap vote. We're going to break down what this means for the future. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and welcome to The Rundown. It is day 276 of the Israel-Hamas war. Well, hope appeared to be growing that a hostage release deal would finally be agreed upon following the reports that Hamas had indicated that the terror group would be willing to drop one of their key demands in negotiations. But following the Israeli Prime Minister's statement on Sunday night, that glimmer of hope now seems to be fading. Our correspondent Joe Brown has the details.
It's always one step forward, two steps back for the thousands of Israelis hoping for a hostage deal with Hamas.
Every morning, wake up with a hope and going to sleep disappointment in a great disappointment.
With Hamas agreeing to compromise on certain aspects of the hostage deal and an Israeli negotiating team preparing to visit Cairo and Doha this week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced that he was standing firm on his side of the negotiations. In a statement on Sunday night, he reiterated his non-negotiable demands for a hostage ceasefire deal. They include Israel returning to battle once the truce is over, a ban on weapons smuggling across the Gaza-Egypt border, a prohibition on terrorists returning to northern Gaza, and maximising the number of living hostages returning from the Gaza Strip. The statement from Netanyahu also notes that this was agreed to by US President Joe Biden in his initial proposal designed to end the war. This comes after Hamas said on Sunday that it was willing to drop one of its key demands in negotiations, namely a complete end in the war for the return of some of the hostages, both dead and alive. The terror group claims that Israel is yet to respond to the latest amendments, but it is believed that it will receive a response this week during a summit in Doha with representatives from the US, Qatar, Egypt, and Israel. Netanyahu's statement was criticised by Israeli officials, who were quoted in Israeli media as saying that the Prime Minister is intentionally trying to drag out negotiations until his highly anticipated US Congress speech towards the end of the month and the Knesset recess, so that he can keep his government, whose hardline members may resign in protest if a deal is agreed. But this will they, won't they feels like Groundhog Day for families of the hostages.
We've been in situations like this before where there were talks for a deal that is already coming to be made, and eventually it was not, and it is a great disappointment. So even the optimistic wind that's blowing right now, we try to avoid these two and keep realistic.
The Prime Minister's statement came on the 9th anniversary of the October 7th massacre, marking 9 months of horror for those who were abducted and for their families who are waiting to see their loved ones again.
Well, several senior Hamas figures in Gaza have reportedly urged the terror group's exiled political leadership to accept the ceasefire and hostage deal proposal that's currently on the table by U.S. President Joe Biden. Now, that's according to a report by the Associated Press, which includes a series of internal messages between Hamas officials describing the heavy losses that Hamas has suffered on the battlefield and the dire conditions in the Gaza Strip as well. Well, an anonymous Middle East official familiar with the ongoing negotiations handed those conversations over to AP, which are both written by senior Hamas officials in Gaza to the group's leadership in Qatar. That's where the terror group's political head, Ismail Haniyeh, is currently based. Now, to discuss this further, joining us in the studio is our Middle East correspondent Ariel Osran, I-24 News editor-in-chief Ali Waked, and Lieutenant Colonel in the Reserves Doron Avital, a former commander in the IDF Special Forces. So, Ariel, I'd first like to turn to you. Break down the details of what these messages actually reveal according to this AP report. And I remind everyone, this is a report.
Indeed, that's an important clarification. Look, we're talking about internal messages between, as you described, multiple senior officials in Hamas's military wing inside the Gaza Strip with Hamas leadership in exile in Qatar, communications that took place between May and June. And in them, not only do the Gaza officials urge the leadership in Qatar to agree to the ceasefire deal, the current proposal that's on the table, but also indicating that the reasons that have brought Hamas to this willingness to accept the deal are factors such as the vast destruction in the Gaza Strip, as you mentioned, also the heavy losses on the battlefield, and pressure from the mediators. Now, what's interesting about this report is that it indicates divisions, not necessarily between Hamas leadership in Gaza and its leadership in exile, but within leadership inside the Gaza Strip. And I think that is what is that most popped out to me from this reporting by the Associated Press, indicating a readiness among multiple senior officials in Hamas's military wing in Gaza to accept a deal, a ceasefire, even if it doesn't lead to the full end of the war, even if Hamas leader in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar, doesn't appear to be in a rush to accept.
Right, and these messages also suggest that Sinwar is holed up in a tunnel underground. He really has no clear idea or understanding of what's happening within the Gaza Strip. But, Ali, I'd like to turn to you right now. This is certainly not the first time that we're hearing from various analysts, war correspondents, and also even Gazans that Hamas is floundering in Gaza and has lost much of its control. But what is your take on this? Is it accurate?
No. I think the truth is the opposite. I think that Sinwar is still in full control of what is happening on the ground, and I think my talks with the Hamas, both in Gaza and outside Gaza, give me a different picture. Hamas outside, Hamas leadership in Qatar is the leadership who is exposed to the foreign pressure of Qatar, of the Egyptians, of the Americans, while Sinwar is the one who on the ground in contact with the military wing which is orchestrated, financed by the Iranians, for the moment think they are capable to continue. And the truth is, and the Israelis admit that every place Israel withdrew from, Hamas got back and succeed to rebuild its force, which obliged the IDF to go back to these areas. So the situation on the grounds proves that this report is not accurate, and that IDF is once and twice and three times needs to go back to areas that it withdrew from to fight Hamas that is succeeding to rebuild itself. Yesterday, we heard the spokesperson of Hamas military wing, Abu Ubaida, who said we are ready to continue this war 4 months. I think the only criteria, that the only important thing for Hamas, same for Mr. Netanyahu, is the day after. Hamas will not accept any proposal that will not give the Palestinian people a real alternative for the day after. If the two machine words of Palestinian state are not pronounced, I don't think Hamas will accept. Gaza is destroyed because of the October 7th. Hamas cannot allow itself to put an end to this war when this impasse is still on the place. It needs to tell the Palestinian people, we did the October 7th, but here the world is talking about a Palestinian state. There are a significant process that will be carried out. As long as this doesn't happen, and we know that this will not happen, I think that Sinwar and Netanyahu are doing everything in order to prevent the day after. And in many days, by the way, in Gaza, like we hear what's going on in Rafah and what is going on in Sajai, but in many areas in Gaza, life is back to normal, if we can use the word normal to talk about Gaza. The public servants of the civil servants of Hamas, if we can say civil servants of Hamas, are collecting taxes, are trying to organize the trade, are trying to organize life, are trying to clean the streets for people, are threatening all those from the big families, what we call in Hebrew the chamulot, have been in contact with the IDF. Some of them, by the way, heads of families, are killed by Hamas, which show that on the ground, not big change is happening.
Right. So the question is, why are we hearing this messaging over and over again? Because really, I would say, at least in the past week or 2 weeks, there has been this messaging from many on the ground, and again, correspondents who have been covering the issue and are very sympathetic, of course, to the Palestinian cause, saying that Hamas is done for. That's it. They have no more energy. They have no more willpower, and you know, Israel's done the job. Personally.
Hamas, once again, on the ground, if Hamas since October 7th until the last holiday of the Muslim sacrifice holiday, mid-June, they paid for the fourth time the salaries for their militants and for their families. I think that we should ask ourselves why in the last weeks the manager of the Shifa hospital is relieved with 120 persons. Electricity is back to the Gaza Strip. United Nations different agencies are getting ready to carry out some projects in the West Bank. This is the big question. I think the partnership, the indirect partnership between the current Israeli government and Hamas will still be with us for the next future.
All right, quick question for you, Doron. I mean, if this is in fact accurate, I mean, what does this mean in terms of Israel's strategy now down the line?
First of all, it's an interesting political perspective of the situation. Sometimes description serves political goals. And the question, what do we have right now in front of us? We're in the midst of a guerrilla warfare. This is clear. I mean, it's not an organized force, but they come, they ambush us, they use the infrastructure of tunnels. This is the first stage that we talk about. The real question is the hostage deal and whether this would necessarily result in the halting of the war, okay? Mm-hmm. So this is what we're in the midst of. So the question is whether we want a hostage deal. I think Israelis want, the Israeli public wants. The question is whether Netanyahu first wants, maybe he wants, whether he can. The question whether in the end game, in the end we come back to this alliance between Netanyahu's government and Hamas, I'm not sure. There will have to be a day after, which is different. The question, who would we bring in the day after in? And this is an open question. We didn't do much about that. Right. And we have to work with our alliances to do that.
When I talked yesterday with Hamas, they say, when Mr. Netanyahu say we want to maximize the number of hostages that will be released. Maximize is talking that we want some of the hostages because Israelis know what is the price that Hamas is asking in order to complete a deal to release the whole hostages. Last time, when Shalit was released, all the people they received 100,000 prisoners. I think that this is the secondary price that Hamas received in the Shalit deal. The most important price that Hamas received in the Shalit deal, that they were recognized as the partner of Israel and of the international community in the Gaza Strip. They became the leader of the Gaza Strip. Projects started in Gaza Strip, reconstruction projects. The billions that they received started after the deal with Shalit. And I'm afraid that Hamas will try to put again the same practice that they did during the Shalit. They have the hostages. Since they have the hostages, all the world is talking to them directly or indirectly, and they will not give up this card easily and for free.
Right. And of course, you're talking about the Gilad Shalit deal from back in 2011. Just some perspective for our viewers who are watching. Ali Waqid, our editor-in-chief here at I-24 News, thank you for joining us. You're going to be leaving us, but our guests are going to be sticking with us in the studio. I'd like to turn now to just shocking images out of the Israeli parliament today. A video is going viral that has angered the Israeli public, showing the brother of Danish-Israeli hostage Itzik Elgarat being dragged out of a parliamentary session. Take a look. Now, this incident was sparked when Dani El-Garat interrupted the brother of another hostage, Boaz Miran, whose sibling Omri was also taken captive from kibbutz Nahal Oz on October 7th. Now, Miran was speaking out against agreeing to another hostage deal with Hamas, which angered El-Garat and led him to accuse Miran of acting as a backup to the far-right committee chair. That would be Knesset member Simcha Rotman. Now, Rotman, who is known as a very divisive figure in Israel, then ordered El-Garat to leave the session, but El-Garat refused to move, leading to the scene that you're seeing right here, a team of ushers physically dragging him out. Now, according to Israel's Ynet news site, several people affiliated with the right-wing group Tikva Forum that also attended this session interrupted speakers as well, but were not ordered to leave the room. Well, joining us now is Shai Wenkelt. He's the father of 23-year-old Israeli hostage Omer Wenkelt, who was kidnapped by Hamas terrorists from the Nova Music Festival on October 7th. Omer was in touch with his parents that morning. He told them that he was scared to death. His last message to them was just before 8 a.m., but it wasn't until around 11 that they were sent a Hamas video of Omer tied up on the flatbed of a white pickup truck in his underwear. Now, Omer suffers from colitis, and his family has been fighting to get him medication since he was taken captive 276 days ago. Shai, I am sure that you saw that video today of the brother of Israeli hostage Itzik El-Garat being dragged out of a parliamentary session. I mean, what is your reaction to that happening within an Israeli government building, which is meant to be serving the public, and perhaps most importantly today, the families of the hostages who have very much felt abandoned during this time?
Thank you, Natasha. First, I want to say that we are very optimistic on these days during the deal that's supposed to come in negotiation between Israel and Qatar and Egypt. And we are forced to do everything that the government can do to do this deal. I think this is a good opportunity, and they have to take it. As you said, Omer has a colitis disease. This is a chronic disease. In a stress situation, he is in a life danger. And he's supposed to go out now in this deal, in the humanitarian deal. Omer needs to come home. We are waiting for him. And I think there is a moment now for the families. 9 months, I can't judge anyone how his behavior can be. We are very suffering. We are very worried. We are doing the best that we can. You can't imagine what is to be 9 months without anything, without any sign. It's difficult. It's unimaginable.
There's no question that as time goes on, it just becomes harder and harder for your family, for all of these families who are just really doing everything in their power to get their loved ones home. Now, the Hostage Families Forum has really done its best to kind of portray an image that all of the families of the hostages are united in their calls for action. And, it's fair to say that the overwhelming majority, just like yourself, have called for a ceasefire and hostage release deal as soon as possible. But, what happened today, we saw a disagreement between two hostage brothers, shows that not everybody is kind of on the same page. Can you explain that to us and kind of how the families are dealing with that together?
Most of the families are dealing okay together. They have the exact opinion, what they think is the best way. No one knows the best way. This is the majority that goes with the family, and this is also the majority that goes with the Israel. Israeli is 67% of the Israeli wants the deal. Mm-hmm. So it's not only the family. It's not only my individual, struggle. It's a country struggle. It's more and more need to do. There are not majority. There are some families, they think different, they act different, they think different than the other families. I can't judge them. Maybe they have a solution. but this is not the way. I think they need to do a deal. This is the best way to take out all the hostages. And now the deal is according to the Paris negotiation. I think 4 months ago, that all hostages must be released in 3 times. This is what we supposed to believe, and this is what we need to take.
Now,
I don't know. I know also Boaz, the brother of Omri. I know also Daniel Garat, that is the brother of Itik. I know them both personally. I can't blame them. It's very, very difficult to see this situation. It's difficult. I don't know.
Well, I'd like to kind of turn to Omer now. What is the most recent information that you have about your son? And if there was any kind of message that you could send him right now, what would it be?
Last information that we have, that Omer is kept in a deep tunnel. He was with 4 Thai guys and Liam O that was released. It was on the 54th day after Omer was kidnapped. It's a difficult condition. He's in a deep tunnel, has no food, has no toilet, has no water. It's hard to speak about it. But Liam told me that Omer is strong, mentally strong. And I know he will survive this difficult situation. What can I say to Omer? It's too long. First, I want to say to Omer, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you are still there, and I did, and I do everything that I can to take you home, all of us. Niva, your mother, Ran, your brother, Maya, your sister, everyone is waiting you at home. You need to keep your strength. I know you are strong. You are strong for yourself, and we are strong for you.
All right, Shai Wenkelt, I'd like to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. Obviously, we're praying for you. We are thinking about your family. We're thinking about Omer, and really, really just hoping that this deal is, going to come to fruition soon, so we can see the return of the hostages as soon as possible. All right, we're going to turn now to the fighting in the Gaza Strip, where the fighting continues. Residents of Gaza City are reporting that the combat currently taking place there is some of the heaviest that they've seen since the start of the war 9 months ago, following the launching of another operation into northern Gaza by the IDF. An Israeli military paramedic has been seriously wounded in battle in northern Gaza, according to the army, and our correspondent Robert Swift has more.
Israeli tanks and infantry are operating in Gaza City once again. The IDF entered southern parts of the ruined city due to intelligence on Hamas and Islamic Jihad infrastructure there, it said. Palestinian residents reported heavy airstrikes prior to the incursion, focused on the Tel Al-Hawa neighborhood. An evacuation order was announced by the IDF's Arabic spokesperson Sunday night.
From Nakba to Nakba, displacement to displacement, God help us.
How many times have you been displaced?
Many times, and we can't find anywhere safe to stay.
This is the second evacuation order given by the IDF since the culmination of its Rafah operation, with subsequent ops in Khan Yunis and now Gaza City. Elsewhere in northern Gaza, the IDF was already conducting maneuvers in Shijaiya, raiding what it said was a Hamas command and control center located in a school and clinic. Hamas and Islamic Jihad indicated that their units were in contact with the IDF in Shijaiya and Tel Al-Hawa, using mortars and improvised explosive devices.
All right, I'd like to turn back to our guests in the studio, Lieutenant Colonel in the Reserves Doron Avital and our Middle East correspondent Ariel Osran. All right, so, we kind of quickly spoke about the video that came out today of the brother, one of the Israeli hostages, essentially being dragged out of a parliamentary session. And I know that you wanted to comment on that because you think that it has a lot to do with kind of the status of the ongoing fighting that we're seeing?
No, I think it would go down in the history of Israel. It is a terrible moment. We're talking about this Daniel, that his brother, and I think not only his brother, another relative, one of them is killed, and one of them, I'm not sure about what his fate, dragged out of this parliamentary. I was a parliament member. I know what it means. This is really unaccepted. The behavior of Rothman is really unacceptable. And this guy is a high-ranked officer in the police, also decorated once for bravery. You can't treat somebody that represents such a valid case. And I think most of the Israeli public is behind this case. Well, most of the Israeli public is behind the possibility of a deal. It's true that there are few that thinks like the way the religious Zionist Rothman, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich think, but most of the Israeli public is in the center, of course. And also the military. It has to be, we have to admit that the military, the negotiation team, the head of the Mossad, the head of the Shabak, Nitzan Alon, the general that is responsible for the hostages, they are all for moving forward carefully with the deal. So this kind of behavior really would go down in the history of Israel, unacceptable.
Yeah, just a quick note. Simcha Rothman, the head of the chairman of the committee, said right before he kicked out the family member of the hostage, he said, "We don't interrupt family members of hostages." That was why he kicked out the family member of a hostage. And a member of Knesset from the Avodah, Na'amar Azemi, said that this act defiled the sanctity of the Knesset. I think that encapsulates
No, it's a terrible moment, unacceptable.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that this is, sadly, kind of a image that Hamas, and you could say Israel's enemies, have been trying to push forward this kind of divisiveness among the Israeli public, within the government. But, obviously these families have been waiting for over 275 days now to see their family members come home.
And to color politically their fight for having their loved one back. This is unacceptable. And I want to stress that the military is behind the possibility of a deal. The military, they are sensitive to what's going on in Gaza. They know the kind of...
Well, they've openly come out and...
Exactly, they openly came out and said it. So.
All right, well, we're going to have to go out for a quick break, but we will continue our conversation when we get back from the commercials. I'm Natasha Kirchuk. This is The Rundown, and we'll see you soon.
Oh, did you?
This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com. This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com.
And we are back. I'm Tasha Kirchak, and this is The Rundown. Thanks for sticking with us. Let's turn to the north of Israel, where the fighting continues. Hezbollah is continuing to fire rockets into northern Israeli communities just a day after 4 people were injured in rocket attacks by the terror group, including a 31-year-old American citizen who is still in serious condition after suffering from shrapnel injuries to his upper body. Well, the latest rocket fire comes after the Israeli army says that it's killed a member of Hezbollah's rockets and missiles unit overnight. The IDF targeted Mustafa Hassan Salman in southern Lebanon, along with several other Hezbollah targets, including a military compound and a munition warehouse. Well, joining us now from northern Israel is Zach Anders, our correspondent. Zach, earlier in the day, the situation seemed to be calm, more or less, certainly less rocket barrages from Hezbollah than in past days. That seems to be changing. Give us a latest update right now.
Yeah, that's right. And we've had since 4 o'clock 5 attacks that Hezbollah has claimed responsibility for. The attacks that have taken place appear to be once again multi-stage rockets, drones, and this ATGM, or really just any ground-based rocket fire that can't be picked up because it's fired by soldiers on the ground, can't be picked up by air defenses or intercepted by the Iron Dome. We have some reports of light damage. There are no casualty reports at this point in the night. And the last 15 minutes or so, we had 2 alarms for communities just northeast of Safad, not far from us. We didn't hear any interceptions. This is about 2 miles away from us. We're still working to put together some details on that. Does not appear that it was a significant attack. And, a lot of the time over the last 9 months, there have been alarms that sound, and we just don't really ever get a follow-up from the IDF, from the regional councils here, as to what really took place or took shape. More often than not, we'll get some sort of update from our IDF sources if it was a false alarm. But really, these are just kind of sit and wait situations. And over the last 9 months here, I haven't had a moment where an hour has gone by and then we get casualty and damage reports all of a sudden. So usually as time goes on, that's a good sign. What we're still watching out for in southern Lebanon have been these attacks. The information stream coming out of these communities, these towns in southern Lebanon, has been a trickle today. We do see some images of the airstrikes that have taken place. We don't know exactly what is being targeted. The IDF has not spoken out on this aerial campaign of today as to if they're targeting any specific kind of infrastructure. But given the communities that we do see being struck right now, these are towns that have been hit extensively throughout the war. It's likely that this is based, or these airstrikes are based on some sort of aerial intelligence that sees Hezbollah movement in this area, and that some of the infrastructure, the buildings, or perhaps even the underground, the subterranean infrastructure, has already been hit by airstrikes, and now this is more targeted killings of Hezbollah men on the ground. We don't see Hezbollah in the last few hours announcing any additional fatalities, but this morning they did. And that was likely from last night's attacks as well. So it was a relatively quiet day up until about 4 o'clock. Then things heated up, and we have had a continuous stream of red alert sirens that have sounded since then. One of them being not too far away from where we are, but again, no interception heard. So still working to put together the information from today's earlier attacks, but right now, no reports of casualties, some minor damage to a home in the western Galilee. Other than that, relatively quiet, especially compared to yesterday.
All right, Zach Anders joining us from the north of Israel. I'd like to turn back to our guests in the studio. We have our Middle East correspondent Ariel Osran with us and Lieutenant Colonel in the Reserves Doron Avital. Ariel, I understand that there are some updates regarding the hostage release and ceasefire negotiations right now.
Yeah, so Hamas issuing a statement a few moments ago, just as you were moving on to Zach, basically saying that Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh made urgent contact with the mediators, warning that the ongoing operation, especially the extensive operation in Gaza City that was renewed and in Rafah, and the catastrophic damage as they describe, will bring back the talks, or will, quote, return the negotiating process to point zero, and Netanyahu and his army bear full responsibility for the collapse of this path. Basically, Hamas indicating that the continuation of the military operation on the ground may derail the talks. I think this adds basis to the claim, long-time claim by Netanyahu, that it's the military pressure that is putting Hamas in a corner. That's what's bringing it to the negotiating table. This statement, kind of frantic statement, I would say, from Hamas, indicates the same. And another headline that we have in recent moments, a Gazan source involved in the negotiations told I-24 News that in the summit that's expected in Qatar 2 days from now with Israeli, Egyptian, Qatari, and American mediators, Hamas will demand the full Israeli withdrawal from the Rafah crossing and the Philadelphia access as in order to allow the negotiations to even continue. They say that the source says that Hamas will demand that Israel does not have veto power in deciding who returns to northern Gaza or who are the prisoners who are going to be released from prison. These are security prisoners, Palestinian security prisoners, many of them terrorists with blood on their hands. So demanding here that Israel have no veto over that. It kind of echoes Netanyahu's statement from yesterday. As negotiations are ongoing, specifying what your principles are and open and public to try and maybe stick the negotiations. At the end of the day, we need to make some order between what are just statements that are made to mislead us, psychological warfare, and what is of substance. And we need to report on these things, but at the end of the day, what's of substance is going to be the official announcement from the Qatari foreign ministry. I think we've discussed this in the past. If there is a final agreement, if the sides have agreed upon a deal, we will hear about it from official organizations. We'll hear it from the Qatari foreign ministry.
All right. Is there anything that you want to add to that quickly? Because we're going to.
No, I'm just saying. In the end, the breaking point. Of course, we can't accept any preconditions while we are negotiating. And the end game, that's the story. The story whether that we can accept some formalization that we'll discuss a prolonged ceasefire. They are going to discuss the end of the war. And in this interval, this is where the negotiation really resides.
All right. Well, we're going to turn to Iran now. Iran appears to be keeping itself busy. Exclusive new satellite photos released by Reuters show that the Islamic Republic has been expanding its missile production at 2 key ballistic missile facilities. Now, the enlargement of these sites comes after Iran agreed to provide missiles to Russia in a deal that was made back in October of 2022. Now, Russia has been on the hunt for such arms in its war against Ukraine, but Iran also supplies missiles to its proxy groups across the Middle East, including Yemen's Houthi rebels and the Lebanese terror group Hezbollah, of course, 2 groups that are part of that axis of evil, of resistance against the state of Israel. I'd like to turn back to our guests in the studio on this. Doron, obviously, Iran has been making various threats in recent weeks to the state of Israel that if we see some type of ground operation within Lebanon against Hezbollah, Iran is going to get even more involved, similar to what we saw back in April with the missile attack that Iran carried out on Israel following Israel's targeting of, commanders in the consulate building in Damascus. The question is, the expansion of ballistic missile productions. What kind of, should Israel view this specific expansion as a major concern?
Sure, we shouldn't undermine the capacities, the capabilities of Iran. They have proven that they have something to show in the 13th of April, and we have shown, and when I say we, is the Western coalition in general, that we have some technological superiority that allowed us this success of interception. But sure, we take it into account when we think of the northern front, when we think of a limited campaign in the north, if it's needed, in order to push Hezbollah to the Litani border. Of course, we are afraid that very quickly it would escalate to a full-blown war. Escalating to a full-blown war, we should take the threats of Iran seriously. When I say again we, it's we and our coalition and the U.S. in this context, not only directly from Iran, also the Shia proxy that are in Iraq, Syria, wherever. All those are parameters of the equation, the big equation that is part of the circumstances right now.
Ariel, I know that there are some kind of details that you wanted to add to this latest report that came out about Iran's missile expansion.
Yeah, we're talking about two sites outside of Tehran, the Modares, and the second site is the Khojir. Now, the Modares site is believed to be the birthplace of Iran's missile program. Basically, according to these satellite images, more than 30 new buildings have been built in these two new sites, in these two sites in recent months. Obviously, the understanding, also confirmed by 3 Iranian officials, is that the expansion of these two sites is aimed to boost production of ballistic missiles. And this, we're talking a lot about in recent months about Iran's proxy activity, how they utilized Hezbollah or the Houthis in Yemen, pro-Iranian militias in Iraq to target Israel. But at the end of the day, this happens at the same time that Iran is continuing to expand its nuclear program. It continues to expand its missile program. This latest report is the latest link in a chain of steps that Iran is taking. The IAEA, the UN's nuclear watchdog, issued a report a few weeks ago saying that Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium is at its highest level it's ever been. And so with most of the focus on Iran's proxy activity in the region, it is important every now and again to put the spotlight on Iran's continued nuclear and missile activity. The current trajectory is in one direction, and that's to amplify their capabilities. And we need to remember that that is the plan.
Right.
Even with a new president, so-called reformist, at the end of the day, the new government, also under Masoud Pezeshkian in Iran, is going to continue to implement the policies of the supreme leader and the IRGC.
Right. Well, and we know that Iran has the largest weapons arsenal in the Middle East, missiles arsenal specifically, over 3,000.
It brings in the emphasis on the fact that we are in a coalition game and we are part of a coalition even in the Iranian context.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank both of you for coming into the studio with us today. We are turning to Europe, some different topics here. Ariel Osra and, of course, Doron Avital. Thanks for being with us. We are turning, like I said, to Europe, and all eyes are on France, where the elections have been a shocker to the world, to put it lightly. Last night, when the results were announced on all of the big French channels, it wasn't Marine Le Pen's far-right party that was on the course for victory, as had largely been expected. Rather, it appears the left and Emmanuel Macron's centrists have made a major comeback. Or have they? Our Joe Brown has the scoop.
Elation to the left of France. Shock to the right. And Emmanuel Macron stuck in the middle with them, losing his majority in the French Assembly, but potentially a key player in control of a French Assembly with no clear majority. Whilst polls and pundits alike were anticipating a victory for Marine Le Pen's far-right National Rally, who won in the first round of voting, her party, which ran on a strong anti-immigration platform, finished in 3rd place.
The quagmire that I warned about has of course come true. France will be totally blocked with 3 groups that have more or less the same influence in the National Assembly. Well, we're going towards that. It's sad. We're losing one more year of unregulated immigration, one more year of losing purchasing power, one more year of a blowing up of insecurity in our country.
In 2nd place was the centrist Ensemble party, led by President Emmanuel Macron. It was Macron who called these snap elections to create some form of political order following his poor showing and the National Rally's strong showing in the European elections. But his gamble may have backfired, with a fragmented assembly split into 3 blocks, making it hard to pass legislation and leading to the resignation of his Prime Minister, Gabriel Attal.
My commitment in this campaign was for me a duty. From the start of this campaign, I've been alerted of three risks. The risk of an absolute majority dominated by the National Rally, and the risk of disappearance for the movement that represents our ideas and our values. Today, these three risks have been eliminated by the French. Tonight, no absolute majority can be driven by the extremes.
But the shock of the evening was that the left-wing alliance, led by Jean-Luc Mélenchon, came out as the largest party, leading to spontaneous scenes of celebration in the streets of Paris. Mélenchon has been accused of being an extremist by his rivals, both economically with his plans to cap the prices of essential goods like food and gas, and socially, with many accusing him of minimising the threat of anti-Semitism in France, whilst his pro-Palestinian stance, which critics say blurs the lines with anti-Semitism, has been a focal point of his campaign.
The Constitution gives the President some prerogatives in terms of foreign policy, but it also gives some to the Prime Minister. So, both will have to get along in order to, for instance, recognize as soon as possible the state of Palestine.
This contrasts with the pro-Israel stance of Mélenchon's centrist and right-wing rivals. But whilst the National Rally has been strong and consistent in its support for Israel, many Jews feel that they are still unable to vote for a party who, under the leadership of Marine Le Pen's father, Jean-Marie, became synonymous with anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial. Similarly, many French Jews accuse the National Rally of using their change in stance as a means to alienate France's Muslim and immigrant populations. But crucially, this election has resulted in a hung parliament, with no party coming close to the 289 seats needed for a majority. According to the French constitution, the president has to choose someone to form a government. Whoever is chosen will need to survive a confidence vote in the assembly, which means that the government will still need a majority to support it. And with the world's eyes soon to be on Paris for the Olympic Games, time will tell whether this will be a welcome distraction or a magnifying glass on a domestic impasse.
Joining us now from Paris is Robert Ejnes, the Executive Director of the Representative Council of Jewish Institutions of France. So, France is going to have a hung parliament. That means that none of the three blocs can actually form an outright majority by themselves of the 289 seats that are in the 577-seat parliament. So what does this mean for France in the near future?
It means there will be probably a coalition between different parties, and this is what we push. We push for. In the first hand, we didn't want the National Front to be leading and to be in the government. Second, now we do everything we can so that the La France Insoumise, the party of Mr. Mélenchon, will not be part of the government as well. And this, I think it's very important for the Jews to fight the extremes, because both extremes had their part in anti-Semitism. So we will do everything we can to promote government, a central government of the Republican parties in the country.
Right. I mean, that was really, you kind of began to answer my next question for you about what this election outcome means for the Jewish community. I'm interested to kind of hear which way Jewish voters were swaying this election prior to, obviously, the outcome of what we saw right now.
We had some discussions within the Jewish community, because some were favorable to the National Rally for their support to Israel since October 7th, for their accusation of Hamas being a terrorist organization, which we did not hear, and we heard the contrary from Mr. Mélenchon on the other side of the assembly. And basically, they were calling Hamas resistant party, and they were calling Israel to genocide the Palestinians in Gaza, and trying to push this idea against Israel. So, which is the reason why some of the French Jews were supportive of the National Front. We at CRIF, we know the history, we know the organizations, we know that both the extreme parties bear their part of anti-Semitism in the country, and we wanted to fight anti-Semitism, and which is why our slogan was nor LFE, nor National Front.
Now, far-left leader Melanchthon, who you've mentioned obviously multiple times now, has promised to recognize Palestine. If we see this man come into power, are we going to see a deterioration in French-Israeli relations?
Definitely, definitely. And this is somehow our fear to see an alliance with Mélenchon, which is why the press release today from the Kyiv was the LFE, the Mélenchon's party, does not have its place at the government of France. Obviously, it would be an anti-Israel. I wouldn't even say pro-Palestinian because I don't see anything they do for Palestine. They really express the hate of Israel in supporting Palestine. But so we really hope that there will not be a party of government.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank you so much for joining us and giving us some insight as to how the Jewish community in France feels about these ongoing election results, because obviously we're going to have to kind of wait and see how this plays out still. It's not over yet. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to turn to Ukraine now, where 33 people have been killed across the country following an early morning barrage of missiles fired by Russia. Well, the main children's hospital in the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv has been seriously damaged, and at least 10 people have been killed in that strike. Hundreds of people could be seen rushing to clear debris at the pediatric center as parents holding babies walked outside of the facility in a panic, as you can see in these images here. The Ukrainian President Zelensky is vowing to retaliate, saying that Russia fired more than 40 missiles of different types that have damaged other residential and commercial buildings across Ukraine. Well, Moscow has repeatedly denied targeting civilians and civilian infrastructure, although its attacks have killed thousands of civilians since it launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine back in February of 2022. Well, joining us now from Ukraine is Nadia Koval, the head of research and analysis at the Ukrainian Institute. So, what is going on here? Why is Russia targeting Kyiv right now and during the day, which is very rare?
Actually, Russia has been targeting Kyiv and other cities of Ukraine since February 2022. So cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, they have actually a habit of collecting a certain number of those, like 40, 60, 70, to go through anti-aerial defenses and then conduct very, very hard strikes in multiple places around the country. So the simple answer would be they have just collected enough cruise and ballistic missiles. And another answer would be NATO summit is approaching and they would like to show some messages that they are still pretty much intended on destroying this country. And finally, they do it because they can, because it's very effective, because one of their tactics is frightening the civilian population, targeting civilians, actually to instill fear, to provide refugees and so on and so forth.
Moscow continues to say that it doesn't target civilian infrastructure, that it does not target civilians. But why did we see a children's hospital hit today? Was this a mistake or was this a message?
Actually, since 2022, so many civilian objects have been systematically targeted, starting from hospitals, schools, universities, cultural objects, anything. Targeting civilian infrastructure is part of Russian warfare. It's part of Russian tactics. Of course, they would always claim that they were not doing that, but actually, this is what they have been done. And actually, the whole amount of civilian infrastructure is skyrocketing, starting with cities who have been just literally reduced to rubble, like Mariupol, Popasna, Bakhmut, and many, many others, mainly in the east of in the city, where the artillery can just wipe those cities to the ground. But in other parts of the country, starting with Kyiv and other big cities, Dnipro and Kryvyi Rih today, they're doing this ballistic and cruise missiles, massive attacks, just to ruin very, very important civil infrastructure. They have been prioritizing energy infrastructure. We had very harsh strikes in April, and today, again, they not only targeted 2 hospitals, but also 3 very big electricity facilities.
Right.
So there's aim is very, very clear, like to destroy electricity grid, heating before the winter and so on and so forth. And yes, I'm speaking to you. I don't have electricity for a few hours now. It's very scarce with electricity right now.
Now, you know, from the way that you're seeing the war currently being covered in international media, in Western media, the war seems to be on kind of low heat, that it's continuing and there's no clear end in sight here. So what is going to come next? At this point, what is Russia's goal?
Actually, the war has become the war of attrition, and at this point, it's naturally starts to slip away from the attention of international media because Islam just has become the factor of life. But the idea now is who will persevere and who will finally win in this war. Because unfortunately, as we can see from today's attack, like the whole aim of destroying the country, destroying the people, hasn't gone anywhere, and we are still in the middle of the fight, and we are still just trying to persevere when we can, when we have some, I don't know, missile to entire.
Well, Nadia, I just want to say, you know, I'm glad that you're safe. I'm sorry that you had to go through this today. Thank you so much for joining us and kind of giving your perspective from the ground. Unfortunately, that is it for us on the Rundown tonight. But don't worry, stick with us on I-24 News because we're going to be back with continued rolling coverage of the ongoing Israel-Hamas war and the biggest stories around the world. I'm Natasha Kirchak, and we'll see you next time.